Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. What part of the world are you listening to this from? Write your answer in the comments. Now, let's get to the story. They say you never truly know someone until you've seen them at their worst, or until you discover the secrets they're keeping from you. For 10 years, my marriage to Lauren was what everyone in our suburban neighborhood envied. We had the perfect house, a colonial-style dream with a white picket fence. Our twins, Ethan and Ava, were honor roll students, the kind of kids who won school awards and beamed at parent-teacher conferences. And Lauren? She was stunning, a head-turner in every sense, with her effortless grace and laughter that could light up any room. Every weekend, she hosted dinner parties for our friends, her cooking the centerpiece of the night. Everyone adored her, and I did too, until the cracks in our perfect picture started to show. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly. Lauren would smile a little too wide during conversations, as if compensating for something unseen. Her phone, once a device she'd leave casually on the kitchen counter, now rarely left her side. And then there were the whispers at night, when she thought I was asleep, soft, muffled words that made my chest tighten with a mix of dread and confusion. Just one more night, I overheard her murmur one evening, "He doesn't suspect anything." It was then that I realized the life we had built was not as unshakable as I thought. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and my heart refused to ignore the signs any longer. Lauren was sitting at the dining table when I walked into the room that morning, her hair perfectly styled, the sunlight catching the golden strands. She looked up, flashing me her signature smile. It was the same smile that had disarmed me the first time we met in college. The same smile that convinced me she was my forever. "Morning, babe," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "Coffee's on the counter. I made your favorite French roast." I poured myself a cup, watching her carefully over the rim as I took a sip. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving in quick, deliberate strokes. The tension between us was invisible but palpable, and I could tell she knew it too. "Long night?" I asked casually, trying not to sound accusatory. Lauren glanced up, her green eyes narrowing slightly before softening. "Just couldn't sleep," she said. "Too much on my mind with the fundraiser this weekend." "Right?" I replied, setting my mug down. Lauren loved planning events for her charity work, but lately, those nights seemed to stretch well beyond the hours needed to plan menus and guest lists. I leaned against the counter, my arms crossed. "You're putting in a lot of effort for this one. Who's the lucky sponsor?" "Oh, it's a local business owner," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Some guy named Marcus Reynolds. He's new in town. Very generous." Her voice was light, but there was a flicker in her eyes. Something guarded. A pit formed in my stomach. "Marcus Reynolds," I repeated. "Why does that name sound familiar?" Lauren shrugged, her smile tightening. "He's been around a bit. Maybe you've seen his name in the papers. He's been donating to a lot of causes." "Generous guy," I said, watching her reaction carefully. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something more, but instead, she busied herself with her phone again. That conversation haunted me for the rest of the day, a puzzle piece I couldn't quite place. Who was Marcus Reynolds? And why did Lauren's tone shift when she mentioned his name? That night, I decided to test my suspicions. As Lauren slept beside me, her breathing soft and steady, I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen. Her phone was charging on the counter, a rare occurrence lately, and I felt a pang of guilt as I unlocked it. But guilt quickly turned into dread as I scrolled through her messages. Most were benign: group chats with her friends, reminders about errands, a few notes from Ava's piano teacher. But then there was one thread marked with a single letter: M. The messages were vague but unmistakably intimate. "I can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing today. Just a few more days. Then we'll figure it out." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't a miscommunication or a friendly misunderstanding. This was deliberate. This was betrayal. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, the phone trembling in my hand. My mind raced with questions, accusations, and heartbreak. I had always trusted Lauren. Never once doubted her commitment to me or our family. But now, as I sat in the dark with the glow of her phone illuminating her lies, I realized trust wasn't as unshakable as I'd thought. Tomorrow, I decided I'd confront her, but not before I got answers. I needed to know how far this went, what she had risked, and why. And, most of all, I needed to know who Marcus Reynolds really was. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting long, golden beams across the floor. Lauren was already awake, dressed in one of her effortlessly chic outfits, a cream blouse and tailored black pants. She moved through the kitchen with ease, flipping pancakes and humming softly to herself. It would have seemed like any other morning if not for the storm raging inside me. I watched her from the doorway, clutching the coffee mug in my hand so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Her betrayal was still fresh, the words from her secret messages echoing in my mind. "You looked amazing today." "Morning, sleepyhead," Lauren said brightly, turning to flash me a smile. "Pancakes are almost ready. I thought I'd surprise the kids before school." "Sure," I replied, my voice neutral. It took every ounce of willpower to keep my tone even, to mask the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. "Sounds nice." Lauren tilted her head, studying me with those piercing green eyes. "You okay? You look distracted." I forced a weak smile. "Just thinking about work. Got a big meeting later." Her expression softened, and she turned back to the stove. "You work too hard, you know. Maybe we should plan a weekend getaway soon. Just the two of us." I almost laughed at the absurdity of her words. A getaway? Now? The very suggestion felt like a slap in the face. But I bit my tongue, nodding absently as I sipped my coffee. Ethan and Ava came bounding down the stairs moments later, their energy breaking the tension in the room. Lauren set the pancakes on the table, smiling and laughing as if nothing was wrong. I envied her ability to carry on as though our life wasn't teetering on the edge of collapse. After breakfast, as Lauren herded the kids into the car for school drop-off, I stayed behind under the pretense of a late start at work. Once the front door closed and her car pulled out of the driveway, I sprang into action. My fingers moved swiftly across my phone screen as I searched for Marcus Reynolds. A few hits came up: a LinkedIn profile, a couple of local business articles. He was the CEO of a boutique real estate firm that had recently relocated to our area. His face was plastered across his website. Dark hair slicked back, sharp cheekbones, and a confident, wolfish grin. He looked exactly like the kind of man who would steal another man's wife. I scrolled further, my stomach twisting with every word. His company was thriving, his name popping up in charity circles. The perfect cover for someone like him. I found a photo of him at a gala, arm draped casually around Lauren's waist, her smile wide and dazzling. The caption read, "Lauren Thompson and Marcus Reynolds at the Save Our Schools fundraiser." It was dated 2 months ago. The pieces were falling into place, each one cutting deeper than the last. Lauren hadn't just stumbled into an affair. She had chosen him. And whatever this was, it wasn't new. That evening, I followed Lauren's movements like a hawk. She was careful. I'd give her that. But careful wasn't the same as invisible. After dinner, while the kids were upstairs doing homework, Lauren said she was going to take a quick drive to the store. She kissed me on the cheek before grabbing her keys, her expression as serene as ever. I waited until her taillights disappeared down the street before grabbing my own keys and slipping out the door. If she thought I'd sit idly by, letting her spin her web of lies, she didn't know me as well as she thought. The store was a lie, of course. I followed her car from a safe distance as she bypassed the supermarket and headed downtown. She parked in a quiet lot behind an upscale Italian restaurant. My heart sank as I watched her step out of the car and check her reflection in the window, smoothing her hair before striding inside. I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. After a few minutes, I followed, slipping into the restaurant unnoticed. The maitre d' glanced at me, but I waved him off, gesturing toward the bar as if I was meeting someone. Lauren was easy to spot. She was seated at a corner table, her back to the door. And across from her, leaning forward with a practiced charm, was Marcus Reynolds. I ducked behind a column, my heart pounding. They were deep in conversation, Lauren's laugh ringing out softly as Marcus reached across the table to brush her hand. The intimacy between them was undeniable, and it made my stomach churn. I watched as the waiter approached, delivering 2 glasses of red wine. Lauren lifted hers to her lips, her smile never faltering. She looked happy. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years, and the realization cut deeper than I thought possible. When I returned home, Lauren was already there, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. She glanced up as I walked in, her expression a perfect mask of innocence. "You're home late," she said lightly. "Did you have a long day?" I swallowed hard, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. "Yeah," I said shortly. "Long day." Lauren studied me for a moment before turning back to her book. I stood there, my fists clenched, fighting the urge to confront her then and there. But I knew it wasn't the time. Not yet. If I wanted to uncover the full extent of her betrayal, I needed to play this carefully. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd dig deeper. I needed more than just suspicions and stolen glances. I needed proof. The next morning felt like a ticking time bomb. Lauren moved around the house as if nothing had changed, chatting with the kids and humming while she cleaned up the breakfast dishes. I watched her every move, each gesture feeling like an act designed to keep up the facade. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she quickly snatched it up, her fingers tapping a reply before slipping it into her back pocket. It was a small thing, but it made my jaw tighten. Lauren never used to care about her phone. Now it seemed like an extension of her. "I'll be home late again tonight," she said casually, her voice carrying from the kitchen as I sat in the living room pretending to check emails. "Another meeting for the fundraiser." "Another one?" I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "Yeah," she said, poking her head into the room with a smile. "It's crunch time, you know. These things don't plan themselves." I nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Of course. You're doing great work." She looked at me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned away, grabbing her purse and heading out the door. The moment it clicked shut, I sprang into action. Lauren's laptop was still on the kitchen counter, open but locked with a password. It was something I hadn't thought much about before, but now it felt like another wall she'd built to keep me out. My hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitant for only a moment before I tried the obvious: our wedding anniversary. It worked. The desktop sprang to life, and I started combing through her files. Most of it seemed innocent: work documents, photos of the kids, plans for the charity fundraiser. But buried deep in a folder labeled personal, I found something that made my blood run cold: an itinerary for a weekend trip. The dates matched her supposed out-of-town conference from 2 weeks ago. The destination wasn't a hotel hosting a charity event or business meeting. It was a secluded cabin by the lake, and the reservation was for 2. My pulse thundered in my ears as I opened the confirmation email. There it was, clear as day, Marcus Reynolds' name listed alongside hers. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight. This wasn't just a fling. This was premeditated, deliberate. Lauren had planned a romantic getaway with another man and lied to my face about it. The betrayal burned, but it also steeled my resolve. I wasn't going to confront her with half-truths or vague suspicions. I needed to know everything. That evening, while Lauren was at her meeting, I called an old friend, Daniel. He worked in cybersecurity, and while we hadn't talked much in recent years, I knew he'd help if I asked. "Long time, no here," he said when he picked up, his tone jovial. "What's up?" "I need a favor," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "And it's sensitive." There was a pause. "All right," he said, his voice turning serious. "What kind of favor?" "I need to track someone." "My wife," I added, my throat tightening around the words. "I think she's cheating on me." Daniel didn't hesitate. "Send me what you've got. Phone numbers, email addresses, anything that might help. I'll see what I can dig up." The next 24 hours were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. When Daniel called me back the following night, I answered on the first ring. "You were right," he said bluntly. "It's bad." He sent me a file with screenshots of texts and emails between Lauren and Marcus. They were explicit, leaving nothing to the imagination. "Can't wait to see you again. Last weekend was amazing. You make me feel alive, Marcus. We'll figure this out soon. I just need more time." The words were like daggers, each one twisting deeper. But the most damning revelation came when Daniel spoke again. She's booked another trip, he said. Next weekend. Same cabin. I sat in the darkness of my office, staring at the glowing screen. The evidence was all there. The texts, the emails, the itinerary. It painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Lauren wasn't just stepping out on our marriage. She was building a parallel life, one where I didn't exist. When I finally went to bed, Lauren was already asleep, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. I stood there for a long moment, watching her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who had betrayed me. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about confronting her anymore. This was about taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of hand. Tomorrow, I'd make my move, and Lauren wouldn't see it coming. The morning after finding the evidence, I woke with a sense of grim determination. Lauren was already bustling around the kitchen when I came downstairs, her hair tied in a loose bun and a light floral dress flowing around her. She looked so serene, so completely untroubled, that for a moment I questioned whether I was imagining everything. But the memory of her messages with Marcus snapped me back to reality. "Coffee," she offered, holding up a steaming mug as I walked in. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Thanks." I sat at the table, watching her move with practiced ease. She handed me the cup, her fingers brushing mine briefly. It felt like a stranger's touch. "What's on the agenda for today?" she asked, sitting across from me and sipping her own coffee. I hesitated, studying her face. Did she even realize how close she was to everything falling apart? Did she feel a shred of guilt? "Not much," I replied. "Just the usual. Meetings, paperwork." "You?" She smiled a little too brightly. "Oh, the fundraiser, of course. It's taking up so much time, but it'll be worth it." "Must be," I said, forcing a smile of my own. "You're putting in a lot of late nights for it." Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered. "It's important work. You know that." "Sure it is," I thought, gripping my mug a little tighter. "Of course. You've always been good at juggling things." She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to gauge my tone. But before she could say anything more, I stood up. I should get going. Busy day ahead. I spent the rest of the day finalizing my plan. Lauren's weekend trip with Marcus was just days away, and I intended to be there when it all came crashing down. I couldn't confront her without solid, undeniable proof, something that wouldn't leave room for excuses or lies. And I needed a witness. I called Daniel again. "I need you to come with me," I said. "To the cabin?" he asked, his voice hesitant. "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. "I need someone there to back me up. I don't trust her to be honest once I confront her." Daniel sighed. "All right, I'll be there." By Friday night, Lauren's bags were packed and waiting by the door. She walked into the living room where I was sitting, her expression casual, but her eyes betraying a flicker of tension. "I'm heading out early tomorrow morning," she said. "Don't wait up." "Another meeting?" I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated for half a second. "Yeah, early prep for the fundraiser. We're all meeting at the venue to go over last-minute details." "Sounds important," I said, watching her closely. "Good luck." Her smile tightened, and she nodded. "Thanks." As she turned to leave the room, I felt a surge of anger rise in my chest. She didn't even have the decency to look guilty. But I forced myself to stay calm. Tomorrow would be the reckoning. The next morning, I followed her from a safe distance as she drove out of town. Her car merged onto the highway, heading toward the secluded cabin I'd found in her itinerary. I had Daniel on the phone, updating him on her location as I drove. "She's on her way," I said. "How's it looking on your end?" "All set," Daniel replied. "I'm already at the cabin. It's quiet, no sign of anyone else yet." "Good. Stay out of sight until I get there." I hung up and gripped the wheel, my heart pounding as the miles ticked by. Every minute felt like an eternity, but eventually, the familiar outline of the cabin came into view. Lauren's car was parked in the driveway. My jaw tightened as I pulled over, parking a short distance away to stay hidden. Daniel met me at the edge of the property, his expression grim. "She just went inside," he said. "There's no one else here yet." "Not for long," I muttered. Marcus wouldn't be far behind. I motioned for Daniel to follow me as we crept toward the cabin. The blinds were drawn, but through a small gap, I could see Lauren inside. She was pacing, checking her phone every few seconds. And then, headlights appeared in the distance. My breath caught as Marcus' car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, looking every bit the suave, confident man I'd seen in photos. Lauren opened the door, her face lighting up as he walked toward her. They embraced, and I felt something inside me snap. I waited until they were both inside before making my move. Daniel followed me to the front door, his phone recording everything. I didn't bother knocking. I twisted the knob and pushed the door open, stepping inside to find them frozen in place, their faces a perfect picture of shock. "Don't stop on my account," I said, my voice cold. "I wouldn't want to interrupt your little getaway." "Alex," Lauren gasped, her face turning pale. "What are you? How did you—" "You didn't think I'd figure it out?" I cut her off, my voice rising. "Did you really think you could lie to me over and over, and I wouldn't notice?" Marcus stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Look, this isn't what it looks like." "Don't," I snapped, pointing a finger at him. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. I've seen the messages. I know everything." Lauren's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her face was a mix of fear and guilt, and for the first time, I saw her for who she truly was. "Was it worth it?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Was he worth throwing away everything we built?" "Alex, please," she finally managed, her voice trembling. I made a mistake." "A mistake?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. This is betrayal." The confrontation stretched on, every word cutting deeper than the last. Lauren tried to apologize, tried to justify her actions, but there was no undoing what she'd done. Daniel stayed in the background, silently recording everything as my life unraveled before me. When it was over, I left the cabin without looking back. I didn't need to hear more excuses or empty apologies. The truth was out, and there was no repairing the damage. As I drove away, the weight of the betrayal settled over me like a storm cloud. But beneath the pain, there was a spark of something else: freedom. I wasn't tied to her lies anymore, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The cabin disappeared in my rearview mirror, but the memory of the confrontation lingered like a bad taste in my mouth. Lauren's panicked excuses, Marcus' pathetic attempts to intervene, it all swirled in my mind, threatening to pull me under. But as the miles ticked by, I forced myself to focus on the road ahead, on what came next. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the house felt like a stranger. Every corner of it seemed tainted, like a stage where all her lies had played out. The family photos on the walls, the vase she'd picked out for the dining table, even the faint scent of her perfume in the air, it all felt like a mockery of the life I thought we had. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank into a chair at the dining table, staring at the untouched breakfast dishes from that morning. The kids would be home from their friend's house soon, and I had no idea how I was going to explain this to them. How do you tell your children that the person they look up to, the person they adore, has shattered everything? Lauren showed up a few hours later. Her car pulled into the driveway slowly, hesitantly, and for a moment, I thought she might turn around and leave. But she didn't. The front door creaked open, and she stepped inside, her face pale and drawn. "Alex," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I didn't look up. "Talk? Now you want to talk? Funny, I don't remember you being interested in talking while you were planning your weekends with Marcus." Her shoulders sagged, and she sank into the chair across from me. I don't know what to say. I know I've hurt you. I know I've ruined everything." "You don't say," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Do you even realize what you've done? You didn't just hurt me, Lauren. You've destroyed our family." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "Not now. Not after everything." "I wasn't thinking," she said, her voice breaking. "It was stupid and selfish, and Stop." I cut her off. "Just stop. I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know why. Why him? Why any of this?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "I don't know," she whispered. "I felt disconnected. From you. From everything. Marcus, he made me feel seen." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Seen?" I echoed. Do you have any idea how hard I've worked to give you this life? To make sure you and the kids have everything you need? And you're telling me that wasn't enough because some smooth-talking real estate agent made you feel seen? Lauren's tears spilled over, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. It just happened. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Things like this don't just happen, Lauren. You made a choice. Over and over again. You chose to lie to me, to betray me. And for what? A fling? Some fantasy? She didn't answer, and the silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, I took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I gripped the back of the chair. I want you out, I said, my voice cold and final. Pack your things and leave. Tonight. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face full of panic. Alex, please. Don't do this. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I interrupted. You've already made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Lauren begged, pleaded, but I didn't budge. By the time the kids came home, she was upstairs packing a suitcase. I told Ethan and Ava that their mom needed some time away to clear her head, but they weren't stupid. They saw the tension, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. Later that night, after Lauren had left, Ethan knocked on my bedroom door. He was only 12, but his eyes were full of worry and questions he was too afraid to ask. Is Mom coming back? He asked, his voice small. I crouched down to his level, placing a hand on his shoulder. I don't know, buddy, I admitted. But no matter what happens, I'm here. And I'll always be here for you and Ava. Okay. He nodded, though his expression told me he wasn't convinced. I wished I could give him more, but I couldn't promise a future I no longer believed in. The next few days were a blur. Lauren stayed with a friend, texting me constantly, but I ignored her messages. I met with a lawyer to start the process of dividing assets and discussing custody arrangements. Every step felt like tearing apart the life we'd built together, brick by brick. Daniel stopped by one evening, a six-pack in hand. How are you holding up? He asked as we sat in the living room. Surviving, I said, taking a swig of beer. Barely. You did the right thing, he said. Don't let her try to guilt you into thinking otherwise. I nodded, though the weight of doubt lingered. Had I done the right thing? Should I have tried harder to fix things for the kids' sake? Or was this the only way forward? The days turned into weeks, and life slowly settled into a new rhythm. The kids and I adapted to our quieter home, though the absence of Lauren was a constant reminder of what we'd lost. Friends and family offered their support, some surprised by the split, others quietly admitting they'd seen the cracks long before I had. Lauren reached out repeatedly, begging for a chance to fix things, but I didn't have it in me to forgive her. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. And without trust, there was nothing left. One night, as I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a strange sense of peace. The anger and betrayal were still there, but they were quieter now, dulled by time and the knowledge that I had survived. Life wasn't perfect, and the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, it was mine to navigate. And that was enough. The weeks after Lauren left felt like living in a fog, where each day blended into the next. There were mornings I woke up expecting to hear her moving around the kitchen, humming softly as she brewed coffee. The silence that greeted me instead was a harsh reminder of how much had changed. For Ethan and Ava's sake, I forced myself to keep it together. Breakfast was served on time, lunches packed, and rides to school given without fail. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Every interaction with the kids reminded me of what we'd lost, what Lauren had thrown away. One afternoon, as I sorted through the stack of unopened mail on the counter, I found an envelope from Lauren. Her handwriting was familiar, neat, and deliberate. For a moment, I considered tossing it in the trash unopened, but curiosity, or maybe some lingering hope, got the better of me. Inside was a letter. The first few lines made my stomach churn. Alex, I know I've hurt you more deeply than I can ever repair, and I don't expect you to forgive me. But I owe you an explanation. Maybe not for your sake, but for mine. I set the letter down, the words blurring together as anger surged through me. Explanation? After everything? What explanation could possibly justify what she'd done? But despite my frustration, I read on. I didn't set out to hurt you or the kids. For years, I was happy, truly happy with our life. You were my best friend, my partner, the man I trusted with everything. But somewhere along the way, I started to feel invisible. You worked so hard for us, Alex. I know you did, but it felt like I was just another task on your to-do list. Another thing to manage, like the bills or the house repairs. When I met Marcus, it wasn't supposed to mean anything. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. I know that sounds shallow, but it's the truth. And once it started, I didn't know how to stop. I didn't want to stop. I don't expect you to understand. I just wanted you to know that this wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me not being enough for myself. I'll always regret how I handled things. And I'll always love you, in my own way. I hope one day you'll find peace and maybe even happiness again. You deserve that much. Lauren, when I finished the letter, I sat in stunned silence. Her words stirred something in me, a strange mix of anger, sadness, and an odd kind of clarity. For so long, I'd blamed myself, wondering what I could have done differently. But now, I realized the truth. Her choices weren't about me. They were about her. I folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope, placing it in the drawer with the rest of the mail. It didn't bring closure. Not yet, but it felt like a step toward understanding. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office to distract myself. But the real solace came from unexpected places. A conversation with Ethan about his science project, a quiet evening watching Ava practice her piano. For all the pain Lauren had caused, she hadn't taken away the most important thing, my bond with the kids. One Friday evening, as the three of us sat around the dinner table eating takeout, Ava looked up from her plate. "Do you think Mom's coming back?" she asked, her voice tentative. Ethan glanced at me, his expression guarded. I set down my fork, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. The three of us, we're a team, right?" Ava nodded, though her eyes were still clouded with uncertainty. Ethan gave me a small, reassuring smile, and in that moment, I knew we'd find a way through this, together. About a month after Lauren's departure, I started seeing a therapist. It wasn't an easy decision. I'd always prided myself on handling things on my own, but I knew I couldn't navigate the storm of emotions alone. During our first session, Dr. Mason asked me a question that stuck with me. "What do you want your life to look like a year from now?" The question took me by surprise. I'd been so focused on surviving each day that I hadn't thought about the future. But as I sat there, I realized I didn't want my life to be defined by Lauren's betrayal. I wanted something more. Bit by bit, I started rebuilding. I joined a local gym, rediscovering a part of myself I'd neglected for years. I reconnected with old friends, accepting invitations I'd once declined. And most importantly, I made time for Ethan and Ava, showing them that no matter what had happened, they were my priority. There were setbacks, of course, moments when the anger and grief threatened to pull me under. But each time, I reminded myself of Dr. Mason's question. What did I want my life to look like? And each time, the answer became clearer. I wanted a life where I felt whole again. One evening, as I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lauren. "Can we talk? I'd like to see the kids. Maybe we can figure out a schedule that works for everyone." I stared at the message for a long time before typing a response. "We can talk, but only about the kids." It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. One small step toward untangling the mess she'd left behind. Lauren and I met at a neutral location the following week, a quiet cafe tucked into the corner of downtown. I chose the spot for its anonymity, a place where neither of us had history. When I walked in, she was already there, seated at a small table by the window. Her eyes lit up briefly when she saw me, but I gave her nothing in return. This wasn't about reconnecting or finding closure. It was about the kids, plain and simple. "Alex," she said as I sat down. Her voice was soft, careful, like someone trying to tiptoe through a minefield. "Lauren," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. There was an awkward pause as we both reached for our menus, though neither of us looked at them. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Thank you for agreeing to this," she said. "I know it's been difficult." Difficult? The word felt laughably insufficient, but I bit back my retort, reminding myself why I was here. "Let's get to the point," I said. "What do you want to discuss?" She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. "I want to see the kids," she said finally. "I know I've hurt you and them, but I miss them. I can't just not be part of their lives." Her words stirred a pang of something in me. Sympathy, maybe, or the faintest echo of the love I used to feel. But I hardened myself against it. "Ethan and Ava are doing fine," I said. "They're adjusting. The last thing they need is more upheaval." "I wouldn't do that," she insisted. "I just want to spend time with them. Maybe start with weekends, or even just one day a week." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked tired, older somehow, as though the weight of her choices was finally catching up with her. "Do you think it's that simple?" I asked. "That you can just step back into their lives like nothing happened?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might start crying. But she held herself together. "I know I don't deserve it," she said. "But they do. They deserve to have their mother in their lives." We spent the next hour hashing out the details of a tentative visitation schedule. I made it clear that this was conditional, that if I saw any signs of instability or neglect, I wouldn't hesitate to revoke her access. Lauren agreed to everything, her voice steady but her eyes shadowed with guilt. As I left the cafe, I felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. Allowing her back into the kids' lives was the right thing to do, or at least that's what I told myself. But a part of me couldn't shake the fear that she would let them down again. The first visit was scheduled for the following Saturday. Lauren picked up Ethan and Ava in the afternoon, taking them to the park and then out for ice cream. I watched from the front window as her car pulled away, a tight knot forming in my chest. The hours dragged by. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart leapt, fearing bad news. But when she dropped them off later that evening, they seemed happy. Ethan was chattering about a soccer game they'd played, and Ava clutched a new sketchbook Lauren had bought her. "Did you have fun?" I asked, crouching to meet Ava's eyes. She nodded, a small smile on her face. "It was nice." Lauren lingered at the door, her expression tentative. "Thank you, Alex," she said softly, "for letting me see them." I didn't respond, simply closing the door behind her. The knot in my chest loosened slightly, though it didn't disappear entirely. Over the next few weeks, Lauren's visits became a regular occurrence. She was careful, almost overly so, sticking to the schedule and avoiding any unnecessary contact with me. The kids seemed to enjoy their time with her, and for that, I was grateful. But I kept my guard up, unwilling to let her back into my own life beyond what was necessary. One evening, after Ethan and Ava had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with a beer in hand, staring at the stars. My thoughts wandered to the life I'd envisioned when Lauren and I first got married, a life filled with love, trust, and shared dreams. That life was gone now, replaced by something messier and more complicated. But maybe that wasn't entirely a bad thing. The door creaked open behind me, and Daniel stepped out, holding his own beer. He'd become a regular presence in my life, stopping by a couple of times a week to check in or just hang out. "How's it going?" he asked, sitting down beside me. I shrugged. "The kids are doing all right. Lauren's been cooperative." He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "And you?" I stared at the bottle in my hand, turning it slowly. "I don't know. Some days I feel like I'm moving on. Other days, it feels like I'm stuck in the same place." "That's normal," Daniel said. "Healing isn't linear." I smirked. "Did you get that from one of your self-help podcasts?" He laughed, the sound easy and familiar. "Maybe, but it's true." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night air cool against my skin. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to hope. Life slowly started to resemble something normal again. The kids were adjusting to the new rhythm, splitting their time between me and Lauren without too much disruption. Lauren stuck to the schedule we'd agreed upon, showing up when she said she would and leaving when the time was up. She didn't overstep or try to rekindle anything, and for that, I was grateful. But even as things stabilized, I couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in the quiet moments, when the kids were with Lauren and the house felt too big, too hollow. Those were the times when the memories crept in, whispering doubts and regrets. It was Daniel who finally broke me out of my funk. "You've got to get out there," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, the crickets chirping softly in the background. "You've spent months picking up the pieces. It's time to start living again." I snorted, taking a sip of my beer. "Living? Is that what you call awkward dates and forced small talk?" "It doesn't have to be awkward," Daniel said. "You don't have to jump into anything serious. Just meet people. Have fun. See what's out there." I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I wouldn't even know where to start. Daniel grinned. "Lucky for you, I do." That weekend, he dragged me to a local brewery that hosted trivia nights. It wasn't exactly my scene. I'd never been the type to hang out in bars or make conversation with strangers, but Daniel's enthusiasm was infectious. The place was packed, a lively buzz filling the air as groups huddled over tables, scribbling answers on trivia sheets. "Relax," Daniel said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's just trivia. No pressure." We grabbed a table near the back, joining a group of people Daniel knew from his running club. One of them, a woman named Lily, caught my eye immediately. She had a quick wit and an easy laugh, her dark hair framing a face that was equal parts kind and confident. As the trivia rounds progressed, I found myself drawn to her energy. She was smart, sharp, and unafraid to argue passionately about her answers. When I guessed correctly on a history question that clinched the win for our team, she turned to me with a grin. "Looks like we got a secret weapon," she said. "You're not just a pretty face." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in months. I'm full of surprises. After trivia ended, the group lingered, sharing drinks and stories. Lily and I ended up talking long after the others had drifted away. She told me about her job as a graphic designer, her love of hiking, and the way she always got competitive during game nights. I told her about Ethan and Ava, about the house I was slowly fixing up, and the challenges of starting over. "I think that's brave," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "A lot of people wouldn't even try to rebuild after something like that." I shrugged, trying to downplay it. "You don't really have a choice. You just keep going." "Still," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "it says a lot about you." Her words stayed with me long after I got home. Over the next few weeks, Lily and I texted casually, our conversations easy and unforced. I wasn't sure if it was going anywhere, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of excitement, like maybe there was life after Lauren. The kids noticed my improved mood almost immediately. "Why are you smiling so much?" Ethan asked one morning as we packed lunches. "Am I not allowed to smile?" I teased. "You're just different," he said, narrowing his eyes playfully. "Weird. Maybe I'm just happy," I said, ruffling his hair. "That okay with you?" He grinned. "Yeah, I guess it is." Eventually, Lily and I decided to meet for coffee. It wasn't a date, not officially, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of something more. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly. She asked about my life with the kids, my career, even my failed marriage. I didn't go into too much detail, but I appreciated her willingness to listen without judgment. By the time we left, I realized I was genuinely looking forward to seeing her again. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a start, and that was enough. Meanwhile, Lauren continued to keep her distance, though there were moments when I caught glimpses of the woman I'd once loved. She sent me a text after one of her visits with the kids. "Ethan told me about his soccer tryout. Thanks for encouraging him. He's lucky to have you." It was a simple message, but it reminded me that, for all her flaws, she still cared about our children. And while I couldn't forgive her for what she'd done to me, I could at least respect her efforts to be there for them. As the months passed, life began to feel less like a series of wounds and more like a canvas waiting to be filled. The scars were still there, of course, but they didn't define me anymore. I was a father, a friend, and maybe, just maybe, a man who was ready to take a chance on something new. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The next few weeks felt like a cautious balancing act. On one hand, there was Lily, whose presence brought an unfamiliar sense of lightness to my life. On the other, there was Lauren who continued to hover at the edges of my world, trying to rebuild her relationship with the kids. I kept everything compartmentalized, afraid that if any of these fragile pieces collided, it would all fall apart. Lily and I went on our first official date, a quiet dinner at a little Italian restaurant on the edge of town. She looked stunning, wearing a simple navy dress that highlighted her warm, natural beauty. Conversation flowed easily between us, and for the first time in years, I felt myself relaxing, letting go of the tension that had gripped me since Lauren's betrayal. "Tell me something no one else knows about you," Lily said halfway through the meal, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. I paused, caught off guard by the question. "No one else?" "No one," she said with a teasing smile. "Not your friends, not your kids. Just me." I thought for a moment before leaning in slightly. "I've been teaching myself how to play guitar," I admitted. "Badly, I might add." Her laughter was soft and musical. "Really? Why didn't I know this already?" "Because I sound like a dying cat," I said with a grin. "But it's therapeutic in a weird way." "I love that," she said, her expression thoughtful. "I think it's important to have something just for yourself." Her words stayed with me. It was a reminder that I didn't have to carry the weight of the past alone, that I could find joy in the small things again. Meanwhile, Lauren continued her efforts to rebuild her relationship with Ethan and Ava. She picked them up on time, brought them home when she said she would, and made an effort to be present during their time together. I could see the kids warming to her again, though there were moments when the wounds she'd left still showed. One evening, Ethan approached me in the living room, his expression serious. "Dad," he said, sitting beside me, "do you think Mom's really sorry?" "About everything." I set down the book I was reading and turned to face him. "Why do you ask?" He shrugged, fiddling with the hem of his shirt. "Sometimes it feels like she's trying too hard, like she's overcompensating. But other times she seems different, like she really wants to make things right." I sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Your mom made some big mistakes," I said carefully. "But I think she's trying. Whether that's enough, that's something only time will tell." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I guess that makes sense. It's okay to feel confused about it," I added. "You don't have to figure it all out right away." He gave me a small smile before heading upstairs, and I found myself marveling at his resilience. Despite everything, he and Ava were navigating this upheaval with more grace than I'd thought possible. One Saturday afternoon, as I was finishing up yard work, Lauren stopped by to pick up the kids. She lingered at the front door after they'd run to her car, her eyes scanning the house. "Place looks good," she said, her tone casual but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Thanks," I replied, wiping my hands on a rag. "Been keeping busy." She hesitated, then met my gaze. "You seem different lately. Happier." I stiffened, unsure where she was going with this. "Yeah, well, I've been focusing on moving forward. That's what we're supposed to do, right?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she might argue. But instead, she nodded. "Right." There was an awkward pause before she turned to leave. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, regret, and something else I couldn't quite name. That evening, Lily came over for dinner. It wasn't the first time she'd been to the house, but it was the first time I'd let her meet the kids. Ethan was skeptical at first, sizing her up with quiet curiosity, but Ava took to her immediately. "You like drawing?" Ava asked, holding up one of her sketches. "I love it," Lily said, crouching to admire the picture. "You've got an amazing eye for detail." Ava beamed, and I felt a pang of gratitude for Lily's warmth and patience. By the end of the night, both kids were laughing at her stories, their earlier hesitations forgotten. After they'd gone to bed, Lily and I sat on the back porch, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself relax completely. "They're great kids," she said softly. "They are." I agreed, my voice tinged with pride. "I just hope I'm doing right by them." "You are," she said, lifting her head to meet my eyes. "I can see it in the way they look at you. You're their anchor." Her words filled a space in me that I hadn't realized was empty. I turned to kiss her, the moment quiet and full of unspoken promises. Of course, life wasn't without complications. Lauren eventually learned about Lily, And though she didn't say anything directly, her demeanor shifted during drop-offs and pickups. She was more guarded, her smiles more forced. It was clear she was struggling with the idea of me moving on. One evening, after dropping off the kids, she lingered on the porch. "Is she good to them?" she asked abruptly. I raised an eyebrow. "Lily?" "Yes, she is." "Why?" She looked down, her hands fidgeting. "I just want to make sure they're okay." "They're okay," I said firmly. "Better than okay, actually." She nodded slowly, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or jealousy. I didn't press her on it. Whatever she was feeling, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. As the weeks turned into months, my life with Lily began to feel like a new chapter, one filled with possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. There were still challenges, co-parenting with Lauren, navigating the complexities of a blended family. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of running from the past. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Life had settled into an uneasy rhythm. The kids were adjusting well to their new reality, and my relationship with Lily was growing stronger. She had a knack for making the ordinary feel special, turning quiet evenings into moments of connection and joy. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something solid again. But the balance was fragile, and it didn't take much to disrupt it. It started with an email from Lauren. "Alex, I've been thinking a lot about the kids and how things are going. I'm really trying to rebuild, and I feel like I'm making progress with them. But I know there's still a lot of ground to cover. I want to talk about the possibility of spending more time with them. Not to take anything away from you, but to show them that I'm here and committed. Let me know when we can talk." The request wasn't unreasonable on the surface. She'd been consistent with her visits and hadn't done anything to make me doubt her intentions. But something about it made my stomach twist. It felt like the beginning of a shift, a test of boundaries I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I brought it up to Lily that evening as we sat on the porch, a glass of wine in her hand, and the kids' laughter drifting faintly from the living room. "She wants more time with them," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And I don't know how I feel about it." Lily set her glass down, her brow furrowing. "Do you think she's ready for that?" "She's been doing everything right," I admitted. "But after everything that happened, it's hard to trust her. I don't want to disrupt what we've built here." Lily reached over, placing her hand on mine. "It's okay to feel conflicted about this. You've worked so hard to give the kids stability. Of course you're going to be protective of that." "But," I prompted, sensing there was more. "But if she's genuinely trying, maybe it's worth considering," she said gently. "Not for her, but for them." Her words sat heavily in my chest. I knew she was right, but that didn't make it any easier. Lauren and I met the next day at the same cafe where we'd hashed out the original custody arrangement. She looked more confident this time, her shoulders back and her eyes clear. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," she said as I sat down. "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. She took a deep breath. "I know I have a lot to make up for, and I'm not asking for anything drastic. I want to spend more time with them. Maybe an extra day here and there, or the occasional overnight." I studied her face, searching for any hint of ulterior motives. "Why now?" "Because I see how much they need me," she said, her voice steady. "And because I want to prove to them, and to you, that I'm not going anywhere this time." Her words struck a nerve. For all her mistakes, Lauren had always been a good mother before everything fell apart. If she was genuinely trying to get back to that, who was I to stand in her way? "I'll think about it," I said finally. She nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "That's all I'm asking." That evening, I told Ethan and Ava about the conversation. Their reactions were cautious, but hopeful. "Does that mean we get to see her more?" Ava asked, her eyes wide. "It might," I said, "but nothing's decided yet. I just wanted to hear how you feel about it." Ethan was quieter, his expression thoughtful. "I think it could be good," he said after a moment, "but only if she sticks with it." His words echoed my own doubts, but I didn't voice them. Instead, I nodded, ruffling his hair. "We'll see how it goes." As the weeks went by, Lauren gradually started spending more time with the kids. It began with extended visits and eventually included the occasional overnight. To my surprise, the transition went smoothly. The kids seemed happier, more settled, and Lauren kept her word, showing up when she said she would and making the most of her time with them. But her growing presence brought unexpected complications. One Saturday, as Lily and I were preparing dinner, Lauren arrived to drop off the kids. Ava ran inside, chattering excitedly about a craft project they'd done together, while Ethan lingered on the porch to grab his backpack. Lauren's gaze flicked to the kitchen window, where Lily stood slicing vegetables. Her expression hardened for a brief moment before she smoothed it over with a smile. "Who's that?" she asked, her tone light but pointed. "Lily," I said simply. "She's been spending some time with the kids." Lauren's smile tightened. "I see." I didn't miss the edge in her voice, but I wasn't about to get into it. "Thanks for bringing them back," I said, stepping inside before she could say more. Later that night, as I tucked Ava into bed, she looked up at me with a thoughtful expression. "Mom said she doesn't like Lily," she said matter-of-factly. I froze for a moment before forcing a smile. "She did?" "Yeah," Ava said, pulling her blanket up to her chin. "But I like her. She's nice." My chest tightened. "That's what matters," I said gently, kissing her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Daddy." The tension between Lauren and Lily simmered in the background, unspoken but palpable. I tried to keep the two worlds separate, but it was becoming increasingly clear that wouldn't last forever. Lauren was making progress with the kids, but her lingering resentment toward Lily threatened to undo that progress. One evening, as I sat alone on the porch, I found myself questioning how long I could maintain this fragile balance. The life I was rebuilding felt precarious, as if one wrong move could send it all crumbling down. But I'd come too far to let that happen. Whatever it took, I was determined to hold on to the peace I'd worked so hard to find. The first direct clash between Lauren and Lily happened sooner than I expected. It was at Ethan's soccer game, a public space where tensions boiled over. Lily and I arrived early, settling on the bleachers with Ava. Lauren arrived minutes later, her sharp gaze landing on Lily immediately. She walked over, her movements deliberate, and sat on the same bench. "Lux." "Lily," she said, her tone strained. "Hi, Lauren," Lily replied, her voice calm but polite. The exchange was civil, but I could feel the tension radiating between them. As the game progressed, it became clear Lauren wasn't just here for Ethan. Every glance toward Lily, every passive comment about family, was a subtle jab. During halftime, Lauren leaned toward me. "Don't you think it's confusing for the kids? Having someone else here when they're still adjusting?" "Lauren," I said, keeping my voice steady, "Lily's been great with them. They like her." "That's not the point," she said, her voice dropping. "This is their family." I wanted to fire back, but stopped myself, catching Lily's glance, a silent plea for calm. I focused on the game instead, reminding myself this wasn't the place for a fight. The fallout from the soccer game lingered in the air. Lauren became more passive-aggressive, making subtle comments during drop-offs and pickups. Lily, to her credit, kept her cool, but the situation was beginning to take its toll. "She's not over you," Lily said one evening as we sat on the couch. "And that's not fair to you or the kids." "I'm not going back to her," I said firmly. "That's not even on the table." "I know," she said, her voice soft. "But if she keeps this up, it's going to get harder for everyone." I knew she was right. Lauren's behavior wasn't just affecting me. It was starting to affect the kids. Ethan, usually easygoing, had started snapping at Ava more often, while Ava withdrew into herself during Lauren's visits. It was clear something needed to change. The confrontation I'd been avoiding came after another tense exchange during a drop-off. Lauren had made a pointed comment about temporary relationships, and I'd had enough. "Lauren," I said, stopping her before she could leave. "We need to talk." "About what?" she said, crossing her arms. "This isn't working," I said. "You're creating tension where there doesn't need to be any. The kids are noticing, and it's hurting them." Her face hardened. "I'm just trying to protect my family." "Your family?" I said, my voice rising. "You're not protecting anyone. You're making this harder for all of us, including yourself." Her expression faltered, the weight of my words sinking in. "I don't want to lose them," she said quietly. "You won't," I said. "But you have to stop fighting battles that aren't there. Focus on being their mom, not on what's going on in my life." She nodded slowly, her shoulders slumping. Okay, she said. I'll try. The weeks following that conversation were smoother. Lauren pulled back, focusing more on her time with the kids and less on my personal life. Ethan and Ava seemed happier, more at ease, and Lily felt more comfortable being around during family moments. One Sunday, as we all sat around the dinner table, me, Lily, and the kids, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for now, that was enough. Just as things seemed to settle, an unexpected phone call from Lauren disrupted the fragile balance. Alex, she began, her voice trembling. I need to tell you something. What is it? I asked, my stomach tightening. It's about Marcus, she said after a pause. He's been trying to contact me again. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. Why would he do that? I don't know, she said, sounding genuinely upset. I ended things with him months ago, but he won't leave me alone. He's been showing up at places I go, just watching. Her words sent a chill down my spine. Have you told anyone else about this? No, she admitted. I didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it is. It's already a big deal, Lauren, I said firmly. You need to report it. What if he? She trailed off, fear creeping into her voice. You're not dealing with this alone, I said. I'll help you figure this out. It wasn't what I wanted to deal with, but for the sake of the kids and Lauren's safety, I knew I had to step in. The next few days were tense. Lauren filed a report with the police, and I worked with her to install security cameras at her house. I kept Lily in the loop, though I could see the worry in her eyes every time the subject came up. Do you think he'll back off? She asked one evening as we sat on the porch. I hope so, I said, though I wasn't convinced. The situation brought unexpected clarity. While my past with Lauren was complicated and my responsibility to her was limited, I couldn't ignore the ways her problems intersected with my life and the lives of my kids. But I also realized how much stronger I'd become, how much I'd built for myself despite everything. The turning point came a week later when Marcus finally made his move. He showed up at Lauren's house, pounding on the door late at night. She called me in a panic, and I rushed over just as the police arrived. Marcus was taken into custody, his desperate excuses falling on deaf ears. The ordeal left Lauren shaken but grateful. Thank you, she said as we stood outside her house, the blue lights of the squad car illuminating the street. I don't know what I would have done without your help. I nodded, feeling both relief and exhaustion. You'll be okay, I said. But from now on, you need to lean on the right people, not just me. She nodded, a look of understanding passing between us. With Marcus out of the picture, life returned to its fragile balance. The kids began to thrive again, and my relationship with Lily continued to grow stronger. The past would always be a part of us, but for the first time, it didn't feel like it was holding us back. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was real, and that was enough.